For decades, official records on Skinwalker Ranch told a simple story. A strange ranch, a few oddball reports, nothing anyone in government took seriously. That version of events held up for almost 30 years. Then, a sealed passage beneath the mesa finally opened, and the results coming out of it are being described by people close to the investigation as genuinely disturbing. Do you trust historical records completely, or do you think some things get buried on purpose by the people who write them down? Let me know where you land on that. And while you're thinking about it, drop your city and age in the comments. Let's see how far this particular story travels tonight. Let's set the scene properly, because this isn't a story that starts with a tunnel. It starts decades earlier with a family who just wanted to raise cattle. In the early 1990s, Terry and Gwen Sherman bought a 480-acre cattle ranch in the Uinta Basin of northeastern Utah, just southeast of a small town called Ballard. It was quiet, remote, unremarkable, exactly the kind of place you buy when you want to be left alone. They were not left alone. Within months, the Shermans reported cattle mutilated with surgical precision and no blood left at the scene, strange lights that moved against the laws of physics, changing direction instantly and silently instead of drifting or falling, and a creature described as wolf-like, but too large, too deliberate, watching from the tree line without ever running when approached. Within about 18 months, the Shermans had had enough. They sold the property and never looked back. What made their account different from typical ranch folklore wasn't just the strangeness of what they reported. It was the pattern of it, a sustained, almost daily accumulation of incidents, logged in real time, that eventually pushed two working ranchers to walk away from their own investment rather than spend one more season there. People who raise cattle for a living area, tales that predate the Sherman family's ownership by generations, describing the same general region as unsettled, even avoided, long before any modern research team ever set foot on it. Local Ute oral tradition includes accounts of the area carrying a reputation for strangeness that stretches back well before the ranch existed in its current form. None of that. Instead, it was the beginning. In 1990, NASA itself trusted enough to fly in orbit. That same man was convinced enough by what the Shermans reported to the National Institute for Discovery Science, known as NIDIS, just to study one ranch. For years, NIDS ran round the Clive. Researcher Colm Kelleher and journalist George Knapp published a book called Hunt for the Skinwalker, the first detailed public account of what NIDS had actually logged behind those closed gates. For a lot of people, that book was the first time this story left Utah and became a national conversation. NIDS quietly disbanded in 2004, but Bigelow kept ownership of the land for another 12 years. Then, in 2008, the record widens again. The Defense Intelligence Agency awarded a contract worth roughly $22 million to Bigelow's research successor, BAIAS, under a program called the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. Nevada Senator Harry Reid, who helped push the funding through, later confirmed on record that he considered the ranch relevant to the study of unidentified aerial phenomena. This isn't a rumor traded on forums. This is a documented, FOIA-confirmed, $22 million federal contract connected, at least in part, to 500 acres of Utah scrubland that one family fled in under 2 years. The program reportedly employed investigators holding top-secret security clearances, cleared federal personnel tasked with studying encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena and their documented effects on the people who experienced them. It ran from roughly 2007 to 2012, and its existence stayed almost entirely out of public view until a New York Times investigation surfaced it in December of 2017, 5 years after the funding had already ended. Skinwalker Ranch was named in some of the program's associated documentation as one of its sites of interest. James, the official who worked directly on this research, later co-authored a book titled Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, describing from the inside how reports tied to this property helped motivate the creation of later, more widely known government efforts to study unidentified aerial phenomena. It's worth noting that the broader program this ranch was tied to didn't disappear when its funding ended in 2012. Its work is widely understood to have helped seed later publicly acknowledged government efforts to study unidentified aerial phenomena, including offices that briefed Congress directly in the years since. The ranch changed hands again in 2016, sold quietly to a shell company called Adamantium Real Estate. For 4 full years, nobody outside a small circle knew whose military-funded seriousness under the DIA contract should physically be able to go, given the surrounding terrain. What kept investigators returning to this particular spot year after year wasn't the shape of the depression. It was the behavior around it, instruments that worked perfectly fine 10 feet away and stopped working entirely once lowered inside, batteries that drained faster than their rated capacity should allow, and on more than one occasion, according to on-site accounts, equipment that simply wasn't there anymore when crews came back to retrieve it. Ground-penetrating radar sweeps of the mesa have reportedly picked up cavities and structured spaces beneath the surface, geometric enough to raise questions, ambiguous enough that no official record has ever put a definitive label on them. The Uinta Basin sits on genuinely unusual geology, layered sedimentary rock, ancient lake beds, natural cave and fissure systems that long predate any ranch, any family, any research program. Skeptics point to this and say, of course, there are voids down there. It's a geological pattern, not a mystery. That's a fair point, worth saying clearly. Because a documentary that only tells you the spooky version isn't being honest with you. But here's what geology alone doesn't explain. Same rough sensation near this spot, the feeling of being watched from below. Here wasn't a single dramatic reveal. The team had relied on for years to keep the story grounded. According to people close to the excavation, more than one researcher described the results as the kind of finding that doesn't just answer a question, it forces you to go back already understood about this property. To be precise, because precision matters here, none of this has been independently verified by outside science. No peer-reviewed paper exists confirming what was actually found. What we have is a pattern of second-hand accounts, restricted access, and an ownership group that has historically controlled information about this property with real discipline. That absence of proof is not proof of absence, but it's also not proof of what's being described. It's a gap, and gaps are exactly the kind of thing this story has lived inside for 30 years. There's a second thread worth pulling on because it changes how we should read all of this. Skeptics of the ranch have made one argument consistently for decades, and it deserves airtime. No peer-reviewed scientific paper has ever been published presenting verified anomalous data from this property. That absence belongs in the picture right alongside the $22 million contract and the multi-decade surveillance effort. Extraordinary funding and extraordinary secrecy are ready. Layer onto that the historical incident map. Long before anyone talked about a tunnel, researchers had already underway. So, what could actually be down there? Let's walk through it honestly, without picking a winner for you. The geological explanation is the simplest one. The Uinta Basin has a genuine history of natural water and time long before anyone called this place a ranch. A newly exposed cavity kept by 3 separate ownership groups. Its uncertainty. It doesn't erase entire lines of inquiry, dollars taking it seriously. And after almost zoom where a leaked internal document or an offhand comment of the other two, a partial statement, enough confirmation to prove something real happened, paired with enough vagueness to keep the actual details locked away for another few years. And there's no strong reason to expect this particular chapter of the record to break it. The seal is broken. Nobody's putting on the record exactly what the team found or why the results are being called disturbing. And until someone does, this mystery isn't closed. It's just waiting for the next page of the record to finally get written. If this is the kind of story you want more of, real documented history tangled up, with the parts nobody can fully explain, that's exactly what this channel is built around. We'll keep tracking this one closely, and the moment anything official comes out of that ranch, you'll hear about it here first. So, tell me one more thing before you go. Out of everything covered tonight, what's the one detail you can't stop thinking about? And drop your city and age one more time so I can see just how far this particular story ended up traveling. Put it in the comments. I read every single one.